It was a cold, rainy night, the kind that made the city look like it was crying too. Tasha, a 15-year-old girl with deep brown skin and eyes full of quiet sadness, was walking home from her late shift at the diner. Her backpack was heavy, her shoes soaked, but her mind even heavier. Every night felt the same. Long walks through broken streets, people who looked away when she passed, and a world that seemed too big for a girl who had too little. As she cut through the narrow alley behind the diner, she suddenly froze. A faint sound reached her ears. What? It was weak, trembling, and full of fear. Tasha's heart raced. She turned toward the sound and saw an old trash can tipped on its side. The crying grew louder. "Oh my God," she whispered, rushing closer. Inside the trash bag, wrapped in dirty rags, shivering and red-faced, was a tiny newborn baby. Tasha gasped, her hands shaking. She looked around. No one. The alley was empty. Rain kept falling harder, washing over the cold concrete. She carefully picked up the baby, feeling how light and fragile it was. Hey, it's okay, I got you," she whispered. The baby's crying softened a little, as if it recognized kindness in her voice. For a moment, Tasha just stood there in the rain, holding the child close to her chest. Her apron was soaked, her arms freezing, but something warm began to bloom in her heart. She knew one thing: she couldn't leave the baby there. When she reached home, her grandmother, Miss Ruby, was sitting by the fire knitting. Her eyes widened when she saw Tasha drenched and trembling, with a baby in her arms. "Lord have mercy, Tasha. What on earth?" Tasha quickly explained, her voice breaking between words. How she heard the cry, how she found the baby, how she couldn't walk away. Miss Ruby looked at the baby, then at her granddaughter, and for a long moment she said nothing. Finally, she sighed deeply and whispered, "Seems like God sent us a test tonight." They cleaned the baby gently, wrapped her in one of Ruby's warm shawls, and placed her by the fire. The baby finally stopped crying, her little fingers curling around Tasha's thumb. Tasha smiled for the first time that day. "She's so small, so beautiful." Her grandmother nodded. "And she's alive because of you." Tasha didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Police questions, foster care, maybe trouble for bringing the baby home. But none of that mattered right now. She just sat beside the tiny bundle of life she'd saved, watching her chest rise and fall. For the first time in years, Tasha didn't feel invisible anymore. She felt needed, and she whispered softly, "Don't worry, little one. I'll take care of you, no matter what." The morning sun crept through the thin curtains, casting a soft light across Miss Ruby's small living room. Tasha hadn't slept all night. She sat beside the baby, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. Every little breath felt like a miracle, but that peace didn't last long. There was a knock at the door, loud, sharp, official. Miss Ruby opened it. 2 police officers stood outside, hats in hand, faces serious. Behind them was a young woman from Child Services holding a clipboard. "Good morning, ma'am," one of the officers said. "We got a report about a baby being found last night." Tasha's stomach tightened. She nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. I found her in the alley behind Miller's Diner." The officer gave a short nod. "You did the right thing calling us, miss. We'll take the child into protective custody now." The words hit Tasha like a punch. "Take her?" she repeated, her voice trembling. The social worker stepped forward gently. "We understand how you feel, sweetheart. But the baby needs medical care in a safe home. We'll make sure she's taken care of." Tasha's eyes filled with tears. "But she is safe." "She's with me. I fed her, cleaned her, stayed up all night." "Please don't take her." Miss Ruby placed a hand on her granddaughter's shoulder, her voice calm but firm. "Officer, you can do your checks, but that baby ain't going nowhere until a doctor looks at her right here." Her tone left no room for argument. The officers exchanged glances, and after a brief radio call, they agreed to have the nurse check the baby at home. The nurse arrived within the hour, an older woman with kind eyes. She examined the baby gently, smiling softly. "She's cold but strong. This little one's a fighter." Tasha exhaled in relief. But the social worker, Miss Jenkins, still looked uncertain. "You understand, Tasha, this isn't about punishment. It's the law. The baby will go into foster care while we search for her parents." Tasha's voice broke. "What if no one comes for her?" Miss Jenkins hesitated. "Then she'll be put up for adoption. Those words echoed in Tasha's mind long after they left. That night, she sat by the crib they had made from an old basket, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She whispered to the baby, whom she had named Hope, "They can't take you away, okay? You were thrown away once. I won't let it happen again." Miss Ruby watched her granddaughter from the doorway, her heart heavy but proud. She saw something in Tasha she hadn't seen before. Strength. The next morning, Tasha made a decision. She went to the town office, stood before Miss Jenkins again, and said with quiet determination, "I want to apply to foster her, legally." Miss Jenkins blinked, surprised. "Tasha, you're only 15. I know, but my grandma can help. She's raised me since I was little. We can give Hope a home. Even if it's small, it's filled with love." There was silence. The office was filled with paperwork, rules, and logic. But there stood Tasha, a young girl, poor, tired, but holding on to something far stronger than any policy. Love. Miss Jenkins sighed softly. "It's not impossible," she said, "but it's complicated. You'd need approval, background checks, a guardian's consent." Tasha didn't let her finish. "Then I'll do all of it, whatever it takes." Days turned into weeks. News of Tasha's discovery spread across town and beyond. Some people praised her bravery. Others whispered cruelly, that poor girl should have just minded her own business. But Tasha didn't care. Every night she sat beside Hope's little bed, humming soft lullabies, whispering, "You're not trash, baby girl. You're treasure." One evening, the local news came to interview her. The story went viral. Teen girl saves abandoned baby from trash, fights to adopt her. People across the country started sending donations, letters, and toys. Strangers called her a hero, but for Tasha it wasn't about fame or sympathy. It was about doing what was right, because when she looked into Hope's tiny eyes, she didn't see pity. She saw a second chance, and for both of them. Weeks passed, and Tasha's world revolved around one small heartbeat, little Hope. She woke up early every morning to feed her, walked her around the small porch, and sang lullabies her grandmother once sang to her. Miss Ruby often joked, "You've turned this house into a nursery, baby girl." But deep down, she was proud. Proud of the way Tasha's heart had grown, how she had turned pain into purpose. The hearing. One morning, a letter arrived. The court hearing was scheduled. Miss Ruby folded it slowly, her eyes meeting Tasha's. "This is it, sweetheart. They'll decide if Hope stays with us or not." Tasha's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "Then I'll tell them the truth. She's my family now." The day of the hearing, the small courtroom was filled with quiet murmurs. Reporters sat in the back, their cameras ready. The story had already gone viral. Teen girl saves baby from trash, fights to keep her. Judge Harris, an older man with a serious face, looked down at his papers before saying, "Miss Tasha Johnson, you are underage and not eligible to adopt at this time. However, your grandmother, Miss Ruby Johnson, has filed a joint petition to foster the child. Is that correct?" Miss Ruby nodded firmly. "Yes, sir. I raised my granddaughter, and I'll help her raise this baby. That child needs love, not paperwork." There was a gentle laughter across the room. The judge smiled faintly but said, "The law must still review your situation. Social Services has the final recommendation." All eyes turned to Miss Jenkins, the same social worker who had come that first day. She stood holding her folder and looked at Tasha. "When I first met this young lady, I saw fear," she began softly. "But now, I see courage. For weeks she has cared for this baby as if she were her own. No child deserves to be thrown away, and no one deserves to be told they can't love." She turned toward the judge. "I recommend that Tasha and her grandmother be approved as Hope's foster family." Gasps filled the room. Tasha covered her mouth in disbelief, tears spilling over. Miss Ruby whispered, "Thank you, Jesus." Judge Harris cleared his throat, smiling. "Then it's settled. Custody of the child, Hope, will remain with the Johnson family." The gavel came down, bang, and just like that, they became a family. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted with cheers. Cameras flashed. Reporters surrounded Tasha, asking how she felt. She held Hope in her arms, wrapped in a pink blanket, and said softly into the microphone, "I didn't find a baby in the trash. I found a reason to believe that love still exists, even in the darkest places." That single line spread across social media like wildfire. People from all over the world sent messages, donations, and letters. A famous TV host invited Tasha and Miss Ruby onto her show. They sat on a bright stage, lights shining down, as the host asked, "Tasha, you could have just walked away that night. What made you stop?" Tasha looked down at Hope sleeping in her arms, then back at the camera. "Because I know what it feels like to be thrown away. Not in a trash can, but by people, by life. I couldn't let that happen to her." The audience gave her a standing ovation. The video hit 10 million views in 2 days. Months later, their small home looked different. The walls were brighter, the laughter louder. Hope had grown, smiling, crawling, babbling her first words. One evening, as the sun set, Tasha sat on the porch, rocking Hope to sleep. Miss Ruby brought 2 cups of hot cocoa and sat beside her. "You know, baby girl," Miss Ruby said softly, "you didn't just save her life. You saved your own." Tasha looked at Hope's peaceful face, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Maybe that's what love does, Grandma. It saves everyone it touches." The wind blew gently through the trees, carrying the sound of laughter down the quiet street. A neighbor waved from across the road. The whole town now knew her name, not as that poor girl, but as the girl who turned a tragedy into hope. The world called her a hero. But to Tasha, she was just a girl who listened to a cry in the dark and answered with love.